In this video, let's take a look at some strategies for segment 1 of the CSWP. I have put some images from a practice on various sketches. Now, I wouldn't expect to do this during the actual examination for the CSWP, but to make this easy to follow. So the first thing I have to do is determine or decide on an origin or a datum, and I see that all the dimensions going this way come from this edge, and then all the dimensions going up this way. So I'm putting the datum right here. Now on this particular problem, the location of the datum isn't specified, but in some problems the exam might ask you to put the datum at a particular location, and to save yourself a lot of heartache and time, make sure you pay attention if they indicate where the datum should be located. So I'm putting it at this corner here. So I'm going to come down and I'm going to hide this sketch. Let me show you a little trick here. So I put these images on here. If you drag this over a little bit and then click on this button, you can real easily then toggle off on rather than right clicking and do show or hide. You can just toggle on and off the any sketches. And again, I wouldn't put the images in sketches for the test. You won't have time to do that, but just so that we can follow what's going along. If I edit the first sketch, we see that I have a variable dimension here. This is for A, and this is for B. So the first thing I did is I went through and I created some global variables. And so if I come over here to my equations and I say manage equations, I have created these global variables. Now if you don't know how to create global variables, you need a lot of practice with that before attempting the CSWP. If I expand this, I can see here's what my current values are for my global variables. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to start sketching some of this geometry. Now I usually leave fillets for last. As I'm deciding on a strategy for how I want to do this, I could do this as multiple sketches, or I could combine a bunch of stuff into one sketch. I suggest that you only combine a lot of geometry in one sketch if you are really experienced and know what you're doing. Be careful. It might be best to just finish this sketch and leave it as is, but I'm going to go on and I'm going to put some additional geometry in here. And so I'm going to draw a rectangle here. Now I could draw two lines and an arc, and it's debatable about how many clicks that is. But I'm just going to draw a rectangle in here, and then I'm going to do a fillet. Now normally, as I said, I keep fillets till the end, but for this particular fillet I'm going to be doing an offset of this in a sketch. I'm preferring to, in this case, put that fillet in now, and I'll go ahead and dimension this distance from here up to here, and that is 60. And then the dimension from here over to here. Now I'm going to make a decision at this point. If there's any chance you think that they might ask you to put in two different dimensions here, you might not make this dimension a function of that. I could have also done an equal, say equal between here and here, rather than put two dimensions on here. So I made some decisions in that, and I'm going to eventually put a hole in here, and again that hole is going to go in the middle of this square, and so I could have done a center point rectangle, and that would have already given me that point in the middle. And there's other ways I could constrain this, but I'm going to put in dimensions as was shown on the practice. Sometimes if they show a dimension, it might be because they are going to have you edit that dimension, versus if you put in a constraint equal, then you wouldn't need to edit that. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in. They did it as dimensions on the practice, but I'm going to make it equal to this dimension, understanding that if the test asks you to make those something other than equal, you have to be prepared to change that dimension. Then I'm going to draw a line, and again, if I go back to view, so I've drawn this rectangle in here. I'm going to draw this line that I see is over distance C, and I think I'm going to put in a a couple of construction lines first and then draw over top of those construction lines. Let's draw a construction line, and I'm going to go from here up to here and over to here. I'm being careful that I don't select, say, the midpoint of this line, or over here at the midpoint of this line. I'll go ahead and dimension that distance from here over to here, and I'll make that equal to the global variable C, and so I need to set that variable, and then I'm going to, I said I was going to put a line over top of this. We can also put this as the variable C up here. Now there's actually two ways you could do this one, because it isn't really technically needed, but they put on the practice exam, they went ahead and labeled this, and so I'm going to also follow the same nomenclature that they use. So let's do equal, I'll make that to a global variable C, and so now those two distances will always be the distance C. I said I was going to draw a line over top of this one. Now when I do that line, again, make sure you don't click on the midpoint here. I don't know that it goes to that midpoint, and I'm going to do the same thing over here on this side. And again, these two lines on the are shown as the same dimension, but there's a chance that they might ask you to do those as different dimensions. So I'm going to go ahead and dimension one of them, and I could put an equal relation in there, but I'm going to instead just make the dimensions equal. And in that case, if I need to change it, I can easily change it. I hit the wrong place there. And so let's dimension this one, and I'll make this one equal to that dimension, understanding that I might not want those to be equal. So I'm going to put in then a center point circle from here, and I'm going to go from that beginning point to this end point, and then I'm going to do offset, and I'll select this arc, and I'm also going to select this line and this line, and I want that offset distance to be 15. And I see that it's offsetting part of the geometry to the wrong side, and so I said I really didn't need both of these dimensions in here, so I'm going to take this dimension out, and then I'm going to try doing that offset again, and notice that this time it offsets all three of those pieces, and I'm going to reverse that towards the inside, and I'll say OK to that. I want to offset this again, but I want to offset that the next profile in a new sketch. I don't want to put too much into one particular sketch. And so I have something somewhere along the line. I did something that caused an equation to go sick, and let's edit, manage these equations. And okay, so I made a mistake in there someplace. I'm going to just delete that equation, and then I will continue on a new sketch. So if I go to the next section view, I'm going to put this geometry in here, and I guess that was better seeing in this one. So I'm going to put this geometry into a new sketch. So I'll start a new sketch on the top plane, and I'm going to then do offset, and I'm going to select this geometry, and I want to reverse that direction, and then this time I want to do an offset distance of 9. Then I'm also going to offset these curves, and let's see if I can get this one in this one. I don't know if I can or not. So I can't use those, so I'm going to unselect those two and just do this portion of it, and I will do that as 9 as well. And then I'm going to I'll just draw these two lines in rather than offset that entire length. So I'll draw a line in here, and I will draw another line down here. I'll put the dimensions in for those. So this distance from here to here, and I'm going to do that as equal to this offset distance, and I'll dimension from here to here, and I'm going to do that equal to this offset distance. And I got the wrong dimension there. Okay, so make that equal to this offset distance, and I want to make this one equal to, so I'll make that equal to this offset distance, so that if I am asked to change that offset distance, I can change it by just changing this one number. Now you could trim up this geometry, but I prefer to just leave it the way it is, and we'll see how to use that in a few minutes. I'm also tempted to put a line from here to here, so that I'd have a midpoint right there, and also put a line from here to here so that I'd have a midpoint right there. But I think I'll just leave that off. But that might be a strategy that you could use for lining up the cylinders. And then I prefer to do everything on the origin planes, on the top, front, and right side planes, if possible and practical. So I'm going to start a new sketch, and I prefer to use the Born technique, where I use only the origin planes. That stands for Base Orphan Reference Node. It's the most reliable technique. And so I'll start a new sketch on the front plane, and I'm going to go around to the front view, and I will draw a line from right here, and I'm going to go up with that a distance of 90, and actually I want that to be a variable, one of the global variables, global variable D, or no, that is right, that's a dimension, and actually but it should be 95, and so let's put in 95, and then I'm going to dimension from this point right here over to this point, and I'll put in that 7.5. So on the drawing they gave you a dimension other than implying that it was in the middle of between here and here. They might ask you to edit a dimension like that and maybe not have it in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and dimension it as they had it on the drawing, and then I will draw a circle up here, and let's go ahead and put two circles here, and I'm going to dimension those. So the outer circle, I'm going to set that equal to variable X, and then for the inner circle I'm going to set that to variable E, and I'm going to change this line to construction line. So let's go ahead and change that to construction line. So if I look at this this front view, so I just put this line in, and I did this circle, and I did this circle, and so this was the variable X, and this was the variable E, and then I have the height of 95, and the this distance 7.5. Alright, let's hide that image, and then I'm going to go over to the right side view, and I will do a new sketch on the right side view, and I noted that 95 is the same on both, so I'm going to convert entities and project that onto as a point onto my current sketch, and then if we go over here to the right side view, I'll do a construction line from that point, and I'll come over to about here, and I'll come down. I don't want to make sure I don't get that point there, and then I'll dimension the distance from here over to this point as 7.5. Okay, that all turns dark. I will draw two circles here. There's my first circle, there's my second circle. I'll dimension this circle, so this one is equal to E, and this one is equal to variable Y, and then I might put some additional construction geometry on here. If I look at this view, so I'm given this height over here of 25 and the height over here of 35. I might go ahead and put that in into my sketch, and then I can just select that as a vertex when I'm doing my extrusions. And so let's do a construction line over here, and I'm going to do 35 on that one, and then I will do another line over here. And sometimes it's best to look directly at it when you're connecting those points. And let's go ahead and dimension that as 25. And I see that that line didn't turn black, and so I missed something. So I drag it, and I see that it isn't connected to this point. So I'll hold down the control key, select those 2 points, and I'm going to make them coincident. It all turns black. I prefer to change this to a construction line, so I'll change that to construction. I'll change this to construction. Alright, so I have all the information I need to model the part. I will save the file, save often, and then I'm going to start doing some extrusions. My first sketch I have is pretty complicated. I maybe should have simplified that some. I'm going to hide a couple of these other sketches for a few minutes to make it easier to see. And so then I'm going to go ahead and select this sketch. Whoops, I turned it off. I'll come over here and I'll select the sketch, highlight it, and I'm going to do extrude. And I want to get these selected contours. And so if you did this as, you know, just a rectangle, you wouldn't have to do so much on the selected contours. But I'm going to tell it to go then up to this vertex right here, and I'll say OK to that. Then if you need be make that sketch visible again, I can still see it, so you might need to show that sketch again. So expand the feature and show the sketch. And then I'm going to, let's just go ahead and select that sketch, and I'm going to do extrude again, and this time I want to get this selected contour right there, and I'm going to tell that to go up to this vertex. So I've already defined my heights in my sketch, so I don't have to type in those heights. And if I change the original sketch, everything will update. And then I want to get this piece, do my let's go ahead and select that sketch 1 to highlight it, and I'll do extrude, and I want to get this contour, and I'm going to tell it to go up to vertex, up to this point, and I'll say OK to that. And then I'm going to hide that sketch, and I'll turn on the next sketch, extrude that, and I'm going to do an extrude cut first, and you'll see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to do an extrude cut. It's trying to do this as a thin feature, so uncheck thin feature, and I'll go to selected contours. I'll clear that. I want to get inside this area right here. So I didn't have to trim that off. I can just leave it the way it is. And I'll do my extruded cut, and I'll tell it I want to go through all, and I want to flip that direction so it goes up through the part. Let's do extrude, and I'm going to select an entity in this sketch. I'm going to uncheck thin feature, clear that, and there we go. Alright, so then I'll do that a distance of 5. So you have to be prepared to quickly recognize any situation and recover from any unexpected results fairly quickly. Alright, I'm going to turn on the visibility of this sketch over here, and I will go ahead and select that sketch, and I'm going to do extrude, and then I want to offset the start of that 10 millimeters this way. So I'm going to say offset, and I'll put in the 10 millimeters, and then I want to go at the opposite direction then. So from this point, the opposite direction, and I want to go the global variable D, and so make sure then that is the total distance is 130. You might want to measure that after you're done to make sure that it isn't 130 plus the 10, make sure that the total distance is 130. And so I'm going to do the same thing over here. So I will do extrude. I'll select that circle. I want to do offset from that sketch plane, a distance of 10 millimeters. And so it's starting out here. I want to flip the direction, and I want to go equal to the global variable. Make sure you put in the global variable. Don't just accept the the value. Make sure that it's that you've got the global variable in here, and we'll say OK to that. Now it might be a good idea to go ahead and measure that. Make sure that you did the right thing when you went from here to here, that you have that as 130. Make sure that this distance from here to here is that 10 offset. And so I'm going to hide. I have a sketch that's still visible up here, and so let me drill down and find that sketch and hide it. And actually I want to put my holes through here, but I tend to do the holes last, like I was machining the part. And so I'm going to go ahead and put the fillets in here, and then I'll do the holes. So I'll select an edge. I'll do fillet. Radius is 10, and so we'll go around. Now I hope if I'm using a Space Navigator 3D device, and I prefer to use that for I think it speeds things up as far as going around your model, but that's a personal preference that I have. And so I have missing one over here. And of course you can edit the feature and add any fillets that you might miss to the feature. I think I've got all of the 10 millimeter fillets, and then I need to let's see, is there anything else I need to do? I think that's it. Let me look at the key for a minute, and I think I've got all my fillets. I'm ready to put my holes in, so I'm going to put this hole in. And so I've already located that with sketch number 1, so I'll turn on the visibility of sketch 1, and I'm going to go to the top view. Now when you're doing a hole command, I recommend that you select the face first. Don't select the hole wizard, and then unless you're doing it on the side of a cylinder. So I'm going to select this face, and then I'll do the hole wizard. And so I'm going to select a counterbore hole type, ANSI metric, hex bolt, ANSI B18.2.3.5 for an M8 close fit. And then the exam in this case gave some custom sizing for the hole diameter, the counterbore diameter, and the hole depth. So here was the original sizing for that. I want to follow what it says on the test, and so that was 15. This diameter 30, and this diameter 10 for the counterbore depth. I'll go to that position, and I'm going to select that point, and then it's in position. If I check over here, if I expand that, check, make sure that those two sketches are fully defined. I don't need to see sketch number 1 anymore, so I'll find sketch number 1 and I'll hide that. And so the last thing I need to do then is put the holes through here and then chamfer those. And it might have been worthwhile to name these sketches so that they would be easy to find, but easy enough to find. So I'm going to do an extrude cut. That's on the plane that's 10 millimeters back inside there, and actually I did a hole. Let's try that again. And you might put these in as a hole. Be careful what they're asking for on the test. If they're going to ask you for something that would be advantageous to do that as a hole, make sure you do it as a hole. And so I'm going to tell that to go through both directions. And so I've cut that. And again, you might watch out for something like that, that you don't run into another feature. And I'll hide that sketch, and then I need to go back and find the sketch for the other cylinder. And so let's go find that, and then I'll extrude cut that. So let me select that circle, and I'll do extrude cut. I'm going to go through both directions. I'll hide that sketch, and I'll put my chamfers on the edge. So I'll select the edge, I'll tell it to do chamfer, and I'll select all of my edges that I want to chamfer, put in the distance, and then accept it. The part of the key now is to know, absolutely know, that you did it right. You know, for taking the CSWP, you should have the confidence that you know that whatever you did, the work that you did it correctly. And then when you're asked to edit the global variables, just you know, go to manage equations and put in whatever numbers. Don't forget to assign whatever material you're asked to assign. And so you know, if it isn't one that's already listed, edit material, assign that material, and then answer the questions with mass properties or whatever it is you're asked to answer. So that's a strategy for completing the CSWP. Hopefully I didn't miss anything during my construction, and hopefully that was easy enough to follow.